person and ready to leave. So it was great.
Here's what I can tell you about Catherine Jansen. She's been making images for over 30 years. She's exhibited and published both nationally and internationally, and is a recipient of a National Endowment of the Arts grant, 2 Pennsylvania Council of the Arts grants, and 2 cultural incentive grants. Her work is represented in numerous museums, corporate and private collections. I know that she is an alumnus of this program. She has her Master's of Fine Arts from here. And I know that she had a long and distinguished career teaching. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Oh, thank you.
Can talk about your work.
Okay, thank you. Hi. Well, first I want to thank everyone for coming. That's great. And I'd like to set up a little intention about the hour or so that we spend together, because I think it might be more beneficial for those of you who are here if we think about it in a certain way. Instead of you just coming here and listening to what I have to say, I'd like it to be a little bit more interactive. So please feel free to ask questions anywhere along the way. Better to ask immediately, because once we get to another place, it's hard to zip back, but any time is fine. And the other thing, and because I've taught a long time, I think this is a real possibility, and I'd like you to play with this with me, is I would like each of you to think everything that's happening today is just for you and no one else here. And that wherever you are in your own work, that what you need to go to that next level with it is you're going to get a hint or a big aha about it with something we say today. And if you play with that idea, let's just see what happens. Is that okay? Would you do that with me? Okay, great. So I would like to start with my early work, and that's really going back like into history. But I started doing work in the graduate program here that led the way for everything else I've ever done. And it started with wanting to do, well, I saw a photograph of a postcard from the Victorian period that was blueprint. And so I said, they had to have coated the postcard with some blueprint chemistry. I wonder if you put it on cloth, if it would work. And so I researched the chemistry, and I started taking little pieces of cloth, and I would give different combinations of the chemistry with the cloth, and I would lay a negative on it and use the sun as my enlarger. And I came out with a really nice chemical combination. Now this is probably where I want to center about this whole presentation, is because if I maybe been a little more knowledgeable, I would have just gone to the right book and found the chemistry and just done it immediately. But I had to sort of invent it for myself. So all along the way, you'll see as I approach a new technology, it's something that I can't get, I have to figure out. I love it because I have a secret fantasy that I'm a scientist as well as a artist, and so I get to run all my little scientific tests, find out what will work. And media and material is really important to me, and equally important is the image going with the material, not just, I can get it on cloth, but why put it on cloth instead of, say, paper. So anyway, let me show you some examples of the beginning of the work, and we can talk about it. And let's turn some of those lights out.
Yeah. Can you turn the back lights on? There's a switch right back in the corner there.
Oh, that's not good.
There you go.
Yeah, is that good enough for you guys? Okay. So this is scaled to life, a silver tea set, stuffed, stitched, and presented. And a couple of years ago, the Philadelphia Museum bought it for their collection, which I'm really happy about, 30 years after it was made. And it still looks good, so the material is very lasting and archival. One thing about cloth that paper can't do is you can stuff it and it has mobility and you can make it three-dimensional. So that was the beginning of what I started doing with my scientific project plus photography. And it quickly evolved into a whole room environment scaled to life. And this was ultimately, within a year or so of my doing it, was printed in the Time Life series in photography. It was shown at the Museum of Contemporary Crafts, and it was printed all over the world. And this I did as my graduate project here at Tyler for my MFA degree. So that was pretty good. And the reason I think it got so much attention is because no one had ever, and you have to go back in time, maybe you weren't even born then, I don't know, but there was no internet, there was no usable internet, there was no digital photography, there was no Google. You couldn't look up a formula in Google. You actually had to go to the library. And so nobody had ever worked with photography on this scale, on cloth, environmentally, so it was sort of a new way of approaching the medium. And I think it just got a lot of buzz. Just some details so you can see, and then to add color to it, I embroidered into it. Now, shortly after that, 3M came out with a machine that printed just a regular copier machine, and it printed, instead of black and white, full color. And I said, great, let me start playing with that. Wouldn't it be nice to make a room environment instead of just blue and white, full color? The first attempts I did is I took the prints on paper, turned them upside down, found some cleaner from the machine, put it on it, and sort of blotted them onto the cloth. And they looked really good, except 9 months later, everything faded. Then about a year later, Xerox came out with another technology similar, and people started making paper for this that you could blow up t-shirts. You know, you could put on t-shirts, so you could make a print on the transfer paper. I have to go back and remember what you do or don't know. And then you would turn it upside down and iron it on. So this house project was done, the whole thing was done 11 by 14, I guess, size papers pieced together. And each room took about a year to do, and I got a few grants to help me with the expense of it. And so maybe we'll do a few details of some of those. That was the bedroom. And then, not to think it's all technically oriented, I was very interested in meditating in different states of consciousness, and I'm also a mom at the time. So my work has always reflected my life very intimately. And everything in these rooms, whatever was happening outside the window, was reflected in the imagery inside the window. I mean, outside the window was reflected on the interior space. So the interior space was reflected on the exterior. So it was like, you know, what's in and what's out. And I also felt like this idea that it looked like a room, but it was really cloth. And that parallel between the physicists who say everything is really energy, or the Eastern philosophy that says everything's consciousness. So it looks like a room, but it's really cloth with the disguise of different things on it. So it sort of met all those ideas that I was already really intrigued with. I'm sorry you can't see all the details, but possibly you've seen some of these before. Are you working with any color copier with your work now? But you're doing cyanotype blueprint, right? Yes. Okay. So these are the boxings from the Polaroid camera. Let me backtrack a second, just to give you an example of the insanity, so to speak, that these things required. Outside the window was a garden, and all the flowers were blooming simultaneously. And if you're a gardener, you know the roses and daisies and tulips don't all bloom at the same time, but if you're an artist, you can make that happen. And in the clouds, you know, there was imagery of flowers embedded in it. And then I took pictures of my children. Let's see if I have that here. Yes, and I put them in the garden, and then I took snapshots of them and then had them on the table. And then I used a Polaroid. I bet you don't even know what a Polaroid camera is, do you? You do, wonderful. Okay, so using a Polaroid, instant photographs, and then the debris from the Polaroid camera was in the waste paper basket. And it just went on and on and on, lots and lots of details. I mean, we could talk the whole hour on each room if we wanted to, but I think we won't.
So Catherine, is that scale?
Scale to life.
Life size? Okay.
Scale to life, right. And so this was the kitchen, and the theme of the kitchen was you looked out into the garden, and there was a and out the window, and there was a vegetable garden, and then everything in the kitchen had reference to that vegetable garden, the imagery. The bathroom, the same thing. You looked out, you looked into a kind of a lake, and there were fish swimming, and then as the water came out of the faucet, in the bathtub, the fish were coming out with it, on and on and on. And then there are fish. This is like sort of like an aquarium. So the medicine cabinet became an aquarium, and the fish are swimming in and out of the bottles. That satin sink was a little bit of a challenge because I never could do one of those easy patterns, simplicity. That's not my thing, but I can make a satin sink. So here's the children's room. My daughter is laying in the bed, and there you go. And that's my son. And that's a dollhouse with my husband, myself, my child, children, the house, and everything sort of dreamlike and realistic, and it interplays back and forth. Now, what I would like to just remind you, back then, it's the first time people could put things on cloth. No one was making three-dimensional photographs. This was a whole new world of fun, fun, fun. And I was really enjoying every aspect of it. This was one of the last rooms I did, and it's called Michael's room. And it's my son, and he's sleeping, and there's a lot of imageries coming out of his room. That's called 9 and 9. My daughter was 9 years old, and my son is 9 months old. Myself. Okay. And this is going back to the blueprint, just so you can see that I did other things besides rooms. I did a project at Art Park where I did a bed the size of a bed book, a book the size of a bed, and each page was done each day of the residency. So I'm going to go back to this a second and just say, from the cloth work, which might be what you're most interested in today since you're process-oriented, if you went to one of my websites, especially Wikipedia, they'll have all the different little categories of things I did because I worked with Kirlian photography. I worked with a way of making it look three-dimensional, and I also worked with costumes for the Annenberg. So if you want to see other ways that the cloth was used, I hope what you would see in all of them is that there was a reason they were on cloth rather than paper, and that there's an integration between the content of the subject matter and the imagery. So I did all this work over about a 20-year period when I had children, and so it's sort of domestic landscape. It's about my life during that time period. When my youngest son finished college, I decided to take early retirement, and I started traveling to India. And let's see, I think that's going to be the next body of work. And so everything switched. I'm no longer, a mom. I'm no longer a householder in the way I used to be. And I wasn't a teacher anymore, okay? So I got to just reinvent myself. And what I wanted to do was to start doing imagery in India that was meaningful to myself. And as a teacher, I had read this article, the psychology article, about how males, when they photograph men, tend to photograph, something like 70% of them tend to photograph landscapes, vision, or landscape things, wide overviews, sort of the hunter-protector point of view. And women tend to photograph, once again about 70%, arm's length view, twig and berry collecting, caretaking. Now you can kind of ask yourself if that is a tendency for you to do as well. When you think that for thousands of years that's part of our almost DNA, the way we had to survive, it's probably not a surprise that men and women might have slightly different ways of putting importance on something that they're going to work with. And I was thinking, because I was really interested in this sort of balance of yin-yang, could you do a photograph that balanced both points of view, the male and the female, the overview, the expansive with the intimacy? And the work I'm getting ready to show you now is done with that intention. Digital photography, which just came about during that time period. Cameras, Photoshop, very critical. None of my images are done with, nobody's asking questions. Am I talking too fast? Okay, okay, it's interesting. Okay, that's the important part. Remember, she said it's interesting over here. Please don't interrupt me if you have a question. So, well, where was I? Okay, so I went to India, and I didn't photograph with a panoramic camera or the Photoshop panoramic modalities. What I'm doing is I'm basically photographing like a filmmaker. I photograph something completely straight, and then I do the top view, and then I do the bottom view, and then I piece them together, puzzle them together in such a way that hopefully you can walk into them or they come out to you, which I feel like is more the way we see than the way the camera depicts an image. So you can see what you think. Oops. I'm going to walk away from this a little bit. Can you see that all this is going on? And that's not too clear. Let's see if we can get a few more that are clear. Let's click the light out for a minute. I think the images would be much nicer. Yeah, isn't that better? Yeah. And I showed you the first one to give you a sense of scale. These are printed very large. No one wants to know what that is, right? What's going on here? Who said that? Just out of being nice over here? Okay, this is a Nagi, and I'm going to talk about them in more detail in a few minutes. It's a sect of holy men in India, and they literally don't have any clothes. They don't own anything. They're monks. They're a type of sect, and they do certain rituals, and this is in celebration of his celibacy. He's breaking the membranes of his penis with a stick, which is like a Shiva kind of mode.
So what year is this then?
These are in the last, say, 8 years, all this work, back and forth. And the man on the left has a tumor on his face. He's a holy man, and he is honored as being from Ganesh, the elephant god Ganesh. And so instead of putting him in some hospital or trying to remove it, in India it might be something that you actually would celebrate. And many people come to him for blessings. How many of you have read Lord of the Flies? Okay, so these little boys were doing a pageant, and they were all playing warriors. And I asked them to stand together, and they just had that Lord of the Fly energy in them. And so when I saw that, I really wanted to photograph them.
So did you like photograph just them and then the sides?
Well, what I did is I photographed, them, and then I go out this way and this way. But when I got back, and oftentimes when I photograph, it's very intuitive, because I think I should talk about that a little bit. What do I choose to photograph? I don't really go out, oh, I'm going to photograph this today. I sort of go out with an openness, saying I'm available. If you want to offer me something, I'd be more than happy to work with it, kind of attitude. So when I saw this and they were willing to, pose for me, and then I did the whole thing. When I came back, it just also, the other thing that appealed to me a lot is the curtains are very female compared to that male adolescent energy. And I thought the juxtaposition of that was really interesting and gave a little grist to the image. Do you see how it goes back like this because of the way I'm piecing it together?
So how many photographs were
I could, anywhere, the least would be 3, and there could be 7 or 8. And I probably work on each image anywhere from 5 to 7 hours when I'm piecing them together. And hopefully nobody would know that except you have a sophisticated eye, but most people look at them and think they're straight from the camera. But the camera can't do this, as you know. And I deliberately do things that only we can do, because if we walk into a situation, we don't just stand there like the camera and look at it. We kind of move around, and right? There's a certain movement. So we get to see it in a much more expansive way than the camera ever could. Yes?
Do you feel like when the iPhone came out with the panorama, it took some of like the joy of this away from the process, or?
Well, you can't get this with a panoramic mode, is what I'm telling you, because if you'd use the panoramic camera, it's going to be a straight line behind it, and it's going to look flat. And I think it looks like there's a screen separating you from the subject. I feel like what I do, or I wouldn't bother to spend all those hours doing it, or I'm a little cuckoo if I would, is that you can actually walk into it a little bit and it actually comes out to you, and there's more of an emotional, the potential of an emotional kind of feeling about it than it would be if it was this sort of flat, almost barrier. Only you can decide, but that's why I do it, yes.
So your decision of taking straight across like this and then up and then down. So like with a subject like that, or like someone more romantic one, did you just photograph this person once, or did they stand there while you did?
No. I do dozens of photographs. Yeah, thank you for asking. Yeah. So if I see something, I try to photograph first the most critical part that might move. I'm going to tell you all my secrets, but you're still not going to want to do it because you want to do what you do. And I hope you do what you do. But anyway, so I'd photograph exactly who's going to move, the little goat and the little child. So she's the one I would get first, as many photographs as I could get of her. So when I go home 4 or 5 months later and I'm playing with them, I have what I need. I have the vocabulary to tell the story. And then I photograph the environment, and I might take dozens or more photographs of that. And I always think, oh, nothing happened. It was so beautiful and I didn't get it. And then I'll go home and I start piecing it together and I get real excited again because it's like, oh my goodness, look, something is happening. It is sort of close. And I'm more interested in how I felt when I saw it than depicting it how it looks, because it's the emotional thing that drew me to want to photograph it to begin with. If that clicks with anybody who photographs in that way. And imagine these being really large too, you know, like 10, 12 feet printed. So I want the resolution to be excellent, so when they get blown up, they look good. Let's see if we can. This is a good example of how you're going down the street and up the street and down the street. There's a lot of movement there. There's a holiday in India called Holi, and everybody puts dye on each other in a very playful way, unless you're a teenage boy, and then it can get rough. So you stay off the streets, but people do it on their roofs. Usually I go to the school or the ashrams because it's a little safer. And so they play Holi. They just touch each other with color. And then she was getting ready to wash it off, and all the kids were around her. Now, I feel like all my images have stories, and she's very much like a Krishna, blue kind of ethereal Krishna image. Yes, sweetheart.
What drew you to India?
Well, I've been meditating most of my adult life, and I had gone to India prior to this work about 10 or 12 times, mainly had stayed in ashrams, seen the back of my eyelids, that sort of thing, and gone to holy places. But I just loved the visuality. I mean, and also everything in India is on the street. So things that we don't have access to in the human experience, except in the privacy of our own little lives, you can just see anywhere on the street there. And so it just was the kind of opportunity for me to do that kind of work, to do this kind of work. Let's see if we can. Can you see that that's an elephant actually kissing him? Every one of these has a story, which I'm not going to pull you through unless you ask me. But this one is, I think, kind of might be interesting for somebody here, so I'm going to say it. Is a man saw me photographing on the street, invited me to come into his home for tea, and it's early in the morning, and he takes me into the bedroom where his wife, the middle one, and his 2 children are sleeping. Stranger with a camera, imagine this in America. They wake up and they're looking around and they're just, oh hi, you know, they're just fine with it. And that sweet look on their face, like, you know, a little disoriented, you know how we feel when we wake up. And the image to me was about that state when you're kind of almost in that womb of sleep, that dark, soft, kind of safe place, and then you're waking up out of it, and the whole room became a symbol for that expression experience. And that's what I'm always interested in, is something that's emotionally engaging or touching to me. So that's the content that I'm always available for. Oh, the story of this is Brahmin families in India, by scripture, are supposed to have a cow in their home, you know, in their household. And so this is a Brahmin family. The grandmothers also live in the home usually with the family. And so this was the grandmother, and that's the grandson. And she didn't want to be photographed, so he had to come sit with her so that it'd be okay. And then the little cow's peeking behind. The mother cow is behind there too, and they have a little patio with the cow in the patio. It's sort of a storybook country as far as I'm concerned. If you like animals, because they're all over the streets, and there's just an endless supply of emotionally engaging subject matter. The first few years I lived in a room, a little square room in an orphanage, because I did SEVA, which is selfless service. You can't photograph all day. So I photographed 3 or 4 hours in the morning, and then I try to do something for the community the rest. So I lived in this little cell, and then the next year I lived on a roof for 2 or 3 years. So every time I go, I live in different places. But I try to live very simple, and I try to live in the same lifestyle that the people I'm around, so that I can not feel that risk of walking out of too much luxury into a situation that's not much less luxury. This is a good example of that coming out, I think, of the way it kind of comes to you.
What's that?
Well, if someone in India invites you, and I have someone from India here so he can verify this, if they really like you, they might invite you to their village. Is this true? And that's a great compliment. Yes. And if someone says, I want to take you to my village, you sort of put your hand on your heart. So this very sweet man who worked at the school invited me to his village, and this is his father, and his father was now retired in the village, and he was under a mosquito net. And basically you go to the village to wait till you die, or that's what he was doing. And when I walked in on him, it looked like a cocoon, like how you're getting ready to become another thing, to go into another thing. And the symbolism of the reality of what he was doing and that metaphor was so striking. So I have all this hand language I use. I don't like to photograph people unless I have their permission. So when we were walking up, I pointed to my camera and I said, and he said, okay, and so I did it. Mm-hmm. And these are all mirrors. Oh, this is a better example. I don't know why we have 2 of them, but at least it's a little clearer. Okay. These are the backs of water buffalo, and there's a bird on it. And it almost becomes a landscape. The buffalo become that expansive landscape, and the bird's the detail. Yeah, this is a ruins where the trees are actually growing into the ruins, and someone tied up a little newborn cow. This is a picture I waited 3 years for. All over India, you'll see huge water buffalo allowing the birds to come and pick the bugs off of them. It's a beautiful symbiotic relationship. And I was walking to Ma Ganga, the Ganges, one morning, and this huge buffalo saw the birds circling, and it sort of went into this collapse of, take me, I surrender. And so the birds came, and see the look on the face, it's just so willing to be taken by the birds, so to speak. And ironically, there's a man sitting there on his cell phone with a discarded chair. So, you know, these things were really there. I didn't make it happen. I didn't put it there. This is an eclipse of the sun. And in India, when the sun is eclipsing, at least the people of Varanasi feel like the earth is under a lot of stress, so they all go to the river and they pray and give her support while the process is happening. This is an offering someone left. It's called a puja, when you make a prayer, and so you leave some offerings, and that's a full moon. And right underneath, it's a funny angle so you can't see the reflection, is the Ganga, the Ganges, which is an incredibly holy river in India, and it's a blessing for people to go into it and to bathe or to give offerings or prayers to it. This is a rat temple, and she's actually feeding the rats. And it's a really beautiful temple, and there's a whole mythology about why. It's not that Indians like rats any more than we do, but in this particular temple, the rats are considered devotees of the goddess Durga. And so there's a whole story about that. These are the woods where Buddha first came after he got enlightened, and they're right in Varanasi, or right within a few miles of Varanasi. Mm-hmm. Well, everything is in cages, and if you put your camera through the wires, you can get different angles, and you can string it together, and what is truth? Oh, I'm sorry.
Do those animals all, are they all the same?
No, they aren't in the same cages. No. They're separated, yeah. Yeah, so I would just, you know, go to the different, and I'll spend a whole day there, and I take hundreds, maybe thousands of photographs. When I come back, I can piece them together to express the mood I remembered more than I'm trying to show you what it exactly looked like. No, I'm trying to show you how it felt, okay? So the Kumbh Mela is an incredible event in India. It's every 12 years, and it's the largest gathering of humanity on the planet. Each one, they have one, they break the record of the one before. The one that I went to, this is the one in Hardwar, there were 200 million people went to it, if you can imagine that many people over about a 6-week period. So if you've ever been to anything that had even 1 million people, who's been to somewhere where there's just crowds and crowds? You mainly just see, you know, the back of people's heads, and you're shoulder to shoulder. It's a very cramped situation. But it's something I always wanted to go to, and I just, you have to plan it a lot because there's so many people going to the same small area. And this particular Kumbh Mela was in Hardwar, and I had taken 3 students from Drexel with me because I'm a co-op for Drexel University teacher. This was a couple of years ago. And I took them, and we had to scout the whole thing out. We went, and we ended up staying in an area nearby, which is called Rishikesh. And the day that I wanted to photograph at the Kumbh Mela, because I knew it was Shiva Ratri, which is in honor of the god Shiva, and I knew the Nagis were going to be there, the Nekeds. Would I see one? I had no idea, but I thought, okay, it's a good chance if I go then. So we had to take public transportation at 3 in the morning. We took it as far as we could get to Hardwar, and then we had to walk 4 hours because they don't let buses and cars and auto rickshaws in because there are too many people. So we've walked about 4 hours, and we finally get to the Ganga where I knew that some festivities would happen. And of course, my students are looking at me at this time like, where's everything except mobs of people? And I saw all these, no one will tell you in these events where things happen because they can have stampedes. So they tend to not want everybody in one place. Is this true or not? Because that was our experience. You'll have to if I'm lying, you correct me. But so I'm, you know, like, where is it going to happen? What's going on? Nobody knows, da 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 da. So I happen to be on a street, and I just get this feeling, okay, let's go on the roof. I asked someone if I could go on their roof, and I took my students with me, and we're about 3 or 4 stories up, and I look down the street, and I'm like, oh no, I can't believe it. There's just like blocks of beige colored blur. What do you think that can be, you know? And so I'm thinking, I can't believe it. And not only that, that street seemed to be leading right into the street where I was already on. And it actually gets better if you're a photographer. The light is perfect. I'm on the right side of the street at the right time of day, about 10:30. Everybody knows if you're a photographer what that means. Okay, so I see this beige coming closer and closer, and indeed it is the Nagis by the thousands, and they get the honor of walking to the Ganges first and bathing first. So I did a body of work called, I called it March of the Nakeds, Nagis. And so let me show you what I was lucky enough to photograph that day.
What did your students think about this?
They said, now we see why you wanted to come. Now I go down balcony by balcony and I get very close to them, but I just wanted to give you a scope. And you can imagine there's a good chance you aren't going to see anything in an event like this. This is kind of nice. Can you see this photograph? He's photographing. He's got a camera. There we go. There's a detail. And not only, and by the way, this has happened for thousands of years. It probably would have looked the same 1,000 years ago if you had been to a Kumbh Mela, because the Nagis have a certain look that doesn't change. And then they had the holy ash, the white ash on them, which I think is beautiful, dreadlocks, hair, and then these gorgeous gold marigolds. So you'll see, I think it's really pretty stunning.
So if they don't own anything, how do they eat?
Well, it's completely by whether people give them stuff. Some of them live in obscure caves and forests and areas where they're actually in little groups. And some of them even have like gurus. But a lot of them just wander. I'll show you other pictures that I've taken in Varanasi where they just walk up and down India. And people know they don't have anything, so oftentimes they'll bring them food or they'll bring them a little money or whatever. So if they don't get an offering that day, they don't eat. Yeah. It's a certain sect. There are many, many types of worship in India. That's one of the beauties of India. This is just so tolerant for so many ways of expression. But there are 1 million of them in the country. That's the estimate. So there are a lot of them. Most people don't see them because they keep, but during the Kumbh Mela, if you're a holy person by the dictates of the Vedas, and you can possibly get to it, you're supposed to come. So it's a good chance you'll see more holy people during that event than you're just going to see if you're just wandering around India. So I'll just let you get a sense. And I'm coming down lower and lower. I'm going from 4 to 3 to 2 to 1 balconies. Look at that little turquoise bag for the artist in the room, which is, I'm sure, everybody. Isn't that great? And these are the females, which you hardly ever see, the female Nagis. Yeah, and then I go up and start talking to them, you'll see. Oh, and by the way, during the Kumbh Mela, it's very auspicious for them to do that ritual where they break the ligaments of the penis, so that's done as part of the procession in some areas.
So wait, but they're celibate, right?
They're celibate, right. And it's just a celebration of that celibacy.
So then how does that line of people continue?
They totally come from it's totally volunteer. And there are a lot of myths about the Nagis in India, which are interesting because my experience has been that Indians oftentimes don't want to have too close a contact with them because they have a reputation of being kind of irritable and that they can give you kind of the evil eye or a bad omen. So I found them to be very sweet. I've interacted with them a lot, but yeah, there's a little, like fear kind of connected with them. See this man's hand on the left? As a remembrance to God, he's held it up for 7 years, and it's starting to wither. The nails are growing. And so a lot of them do practices, austerities that are very severe. And then I wanted to show you some of the opulence of India. And other holy men, of course, come to the Kumbh Mela, and some of them have ashrams or have devotees and have some opulence, and the colors are always so beautiful. So I think I have some of these to show you. These are policemen, and there are lots of policemen who guard the Nagis.
Are these images also constructed?
A lot of them are, because if you pay attention to them, some of them you just really couldn't get with that. And here they are. Finally, they do actually go into the water, and they're the first ones in the water.
Is it very difficult to piece them together when there's lots of people involved?
Really difficult, hours and hours. I like it though. Better like it, right? So this year, every year I try to do something I haven't done in India. And this year I went to the Pushkar Camel Festival, and that happens once a year as well. It happens around the full moon of Brahman, and millions of people come to this particular area of India as well. But predominantly I went because there are going to be thousands and thousands of camels, and the nomads come from all over the desert. They know to meet at this time of year, and you see them streaming in to this one little place. If you go up on a mountain, there's a little mountain you can climb. You can actually see these trails of streaming animals and people coming in. And I do some work with rescue for animals in India, for dogs and things like that in Varanasi. And I've gotten to know veterinarians all over the country because I go and visit them and find out what they do so we can do the same thing there. And in Jaipur, which is the best veterinary area in India, they're the most successful, they have a special camp to take care of wounded and sick camels, which is free at this fair. And they invited me if I wanted to come and stay at their free clinic. And I thought, well, this is great. If I'm at the free clinic, maybe they won't mind if I photograph them. And so kind of interesting, I brought tools for rasps and tools for operations on camels in my suitcase. I don't know how I get through. My luggage is crazy. But anyway, this was a year I had lots of surgical tools and equipment for operating on camels. And it really did turn out pretty wonderful, because when I was there, they got used to me. And then when I would drift out and walk, and I spent about 10 days by myself walking through their little encampments and villages, they didn't mind me being there. And so I had free reign to, I was almost like invisible. That's just her. We saw her somewhere. She's okay. And I thought this was particularly interesting because I didn't play with the scale here. And look how tiny the children look in relationship to the camels. Another thing is there's a sweetness often between animals and the people who have them. He's giving this camel a little puff of his smoke. And you see that quite often. Now, I'd like to just tell you one little story, even though you won't ask me any questions. I'll project this in a little bit. But when I was getting ready to go, a friend of mine gave me a book on this woman who lived with Rabari nomads and their camels and all for about 9 months or a year. And the book was fascinating. It gave me a kind of a background of what I might be looking for. So I got almost to the end of the book, and I thought, oh my gosh, I had this like memory of being around 10 years old and watching a news clip where there was this very Caucasian looking woman. I'm pretty sure it was the same woman. And she was being interviewed, and she was with these tribes of nomads and all these camels, and there was a man behind her milking a camel, and the milk was going in a little tin cup, well, a stainless steel cup. That's what they use in India, predominantly steel instead of ceramic. And then he took this sort of bubbly, warm camel's milk to her to drink. And I remember as a child thinking, I want to do that when I grow up. And I completely forgot about it. Okay? And then when I read the book, I sort of remembered, oh yeah, I bet this is the woman who I saw on this, and now I get to go, at least I'm not going to live with them, but at least I get to go see them. And so, okay, so let me go back here again. So I thought I gave you more of those, but I didn't put as many. So I'm towards the end of my trip, I'm meandering through, taking photographs, and I could kind of see in the background, someone was milking a camel, and it was going into a little tin cup, and then he brings it over to me and hands it to me to drink. So, India's magic for me.
The background on this
Isn't that amazing?
with the
I know, I agree with you. There are a lot of gifts in photography, aren't there? Yeah, yeah. And these are men bathing in a water hole, and there's a camel drinking the water on the left. I guess you can see that. So I'm just going to show you some recent photographs, okay, that I've taken in the last year or two, just to give you another just some more information. These are sisters. That's the full moon of Brahman during that celebration period. Just to give you an idea of the detail, if you saw these photographs, they have even though they're very large, the detail's very beautiful, I think. They also had horses there, and they were white that I've never seen in anything. They literally glowed. It's a livestock fair, but predominantly camels. The year before, I followed elephants for 2 weeks in Kerala. I would just get the rickshaw driver to take me to a temple, because it was a season where they had a lot of celebrations with elephants, and then and they take them through the streets and bless the people. And so I just followed them until my feet got too sore to move, and then I wouldn't know where I was, and I would just flag down a rickshaw driver, and I'd say, this is where I'm staying, can you take me back? And it was so much fun. It's like something that probably every kid in the world would love to do, and you probably have to be an adult to do it, but it was really fun. Oh, elephant. And this is a leper colony where I do some charity work when I'm in India. And I know these people pretty well. And when I visited this particular man this time, he told me that Jesus had been coming to visit him. And I'm thinking, well, this is the abode of Shiva. Everybody just talks about Shiva in Varanasi. And I said, well, how do you know about Jesus? And he says, oh, when I sing this special song, he comes to me in the morning. So he started singing. I said, he said, do you want me to sing it for you? And I said, oh, yes. So he started singing it, and it was like he started to glow. And as you can see, his face and hands, I mean, he almost doesn't look human. But once he got so joyful, I just thought this sort of beauty started emanating from him. And there's a machine that a company gave me that puts electromagnetic energy into people, and it helps them heal more quickly. And I did a workshop when I was there where I would just set up a little camp on the river and treat people if they had injuries or illnesses. And so this one man had terrible burns all over his body, and I treated him on one side of his body, and I noticed he sat behind me, and maybe 20, 30, 40 other people got treated, and he just stayed there. Usually people get treated and they leave. And then he at the very end, he said, "Could I have one more treatment?" And I said, "Sure." And then he turned around and the whole back of his body was also burned. And you know, burns are real, even scars, they kind of pull, and I think they kind of pull you in, and they're very uncomfortable. And so he laid down on the equipment, and all of a sudden it was this sort of, and this is how I photograph, I just had that feeling that everything was like a blessing was happening. And so I just slowly walked away, picked up my camera, and photographed him. And I hope this gives the feeling of incredible peace and softness that it felt in that moment on the river. I hope I have a detail to show you. Oh yes, let me go back. If you throw water into this particular little lake, this is in Jasmine, this is what you'll get. They literally, catfish go right on top of each other, maybe about a half a foot up. You just throw a little, I'm sorry, I probably said water, throw some food. Yeah, whoever's taping me has to correct all my stuff. But anyway, yes, I throw a little crumbs in, and the fish just, it's a blessing in India to feed animals, and many people just walk out in the morning and just feed animals. And so these fish have gotten used to being fed, but it was amazing. They would just stack right on top of themselves right out of the water. I'm going to go back and see the overview. Okay. Is that it? I think that's it. Okay, that's it. Not too many questions. Any questions at the end of the day?
What are you going to do next?
What am I going to do next? Well, I'm going to Hampi this year. I've never been to Hampi. Really excited about that. This gorgeous landscape. I haven't done landscapes in a long time. And I'm also going to Goa. I've never been to Goa. So I'll go do the churches. About 500 years ago, it was the Christian center of the East. They had the most activity. So I'm looking forward to doing that. And then I have a project with a monk in Vrindavan that I'm going to be working on. And then besides the work I do in Varanasi always. It's always something fun to do. Yeah, I have fun even thinking up the stuff. Yes?
What organizations are you associated with?
I started my own organization. It's called Friends of Varanasi. I'm a one-person pony act. So I just fill my suitcase up with stuff and distribute it, or sometimes my friends, it's for $150 you can send a child to school. Some of my friends have been supporting children, and you know, I just do things like that. Yeah, it's real easy. Just, you know, as you go along, you do something. There are cats there, but a lot of Indians don't think cats are like pets, or even they might have a little evil. And I lived with a family once, and I was telling them that we slept with cats in America. They couldn't believe it. And they made me imitate a cat because they thought it was so funny. You know, like that, you know, they walk like this and the whole bit. And they just couldn't, I'm sure they thought I was lying to them when I told them that we love them and kiss them and have them in our homes. But you have to realize they aren't the best pet in India because people work on the floor, they kind of squat and work, and milk is such a big part, and they don't have refrigerators. So, you know, a cat would not probably be your best friend in that situation, especially when food is at a minimum, et cetera, et cetera. But a lot of Italians seem to love India, and they come and they bring their cats. That's what I've noticed. Yeah. Any other curiosities?
The Italian cats come and they go back to Italy, or they come?
I think they just procreate. I think they just procreate. I've noticed there's a little Italian contingency in Varanasi, and they seem to have more cats than any other place I've ever been. Sure.
So when you're constructing these things,
Mm-hmm.
I ask you, do you ever use perspective correction?
Oh yeah.
Things that
I don't use I just take so many that when I get back, I know I can piece it together. It's almost intuitive. Like I start working just intuitively, and I say, this is such a rich resource. Let me just get as much data as I can get. And then when I come back, I always have what I need. And in fact, I have things I didn't even know I had. So that's the fun of it. You know, like you really don't know what you're going to do with it.
So you do soften edges.
I soften edges. I have some things far away and some things close. I move my angles because I think the human experience is not just flat. You know, sometimes we focus in, I see some beautiful red hair back there, and then I see this little string on your arm here. So there's this, you know, there's always this play of perspective as we experience something. So I do that a lot. If you saw my real photographs, you'll see, oh, why is this in focus and this isn't? You might kind of notice that. But it'll be subtle. You might not notice it.
What type of camera do you primarily use?
Oh, I feel like such a betrayer. I used to be a Nikon girl, and I recently changed to Sony because they have a camera now that has a transparent lens, so it doesn't actually flip, so you can take like 20 images a second. And I didn't bring some of my images that really benefit from that, but sometimes if you're taking birds in flight and stuff, it's just amazing. Yeah. And digital photography is perfect for this environment because you don't have to carry a lot of equipment, and it's so good in different light sources.
Do you use artificial lights ever?
Never. I always use natural light. Can I tell you another little story, just one more? How many of you, I'm not going to even ask you if you like Michael Jackson or not, but I happen to like him a lot. And I think he's a great artist no matter what. He's a genius. And I saw an interview one time, and someone said, how do you get your ideas? And he says, oh, they come to me. Whenever they come to me, I just start working with them. And he said, sometimes they come in the middle of the night, and then I have to get up and work with them. And the interviewer said, well, why don't you just keep a pad by your bed, and when you get an idea in the middle of the night, write it down, then you can work on it in the morning. And he says, oh, no, you don't get it. He said, if I don't do it right then, it's given to Prince. So when I'm in India, I'm not kidding, I sleep with my camera. It is on me every second. And I never say, oh, I'll get it another time. So when I saw that interview, I knew that I worked in a certain way like he did, because it's always a gift for me, the way I work. And I don't make it happen. I don't know what's going to happen. If I'm given a gift and I don't work on it right there, I'll never get it again, and it'll be given to someone else. Yeah. So it's just if you create a story to what you're doing and a technique and something that really excites you, it's really good for the long run. It's great when you have a lecture or a show or a publication, but there are a lot of dry periods in there that probably won't happen for most artists. So if you aren't getting a lot of juice from what you're doing, most likely you won't continue doing it. So I really think find what gives you really joy, juice, and make it your storyline, make it your technique, and it will carry you through all the periods. Anything else? Okay.
Very good. Well, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you, the guests that came. That was very sweet of you to come out in the late afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.